Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good to see familiar faces and some new faces. I'm sure that you are all here because life is going so smoothly that it's all bonbons and cat videos all day. I'm going to talk about adversity, and I know Master gave a talk last week on adversity, but I thought I'd couple the Buddhist concepts of adversity with adversity through a person by the name of Dr. Stolles, who's been doing that for 30 years or so. But quite frankly, I think what he did was he co-opted Buddhist adversity principles and made a lot of money doing it. So Stolles defines adversity, the adversity quotient, and there are three quotients: intelligence quotients, adversity quotient, and the emotional quotient. We're going to talk about the adversity quotient, and he defines Dr. Stolles defines this as the measure of an individual's capacity to respond, withstand, overcome challenges and setbacks. If we look at the Buddhist understanding, in Buddhism, we don't look at adversity as a setback as much as it is a teacher, because it's in the worst of times that we define who we are as a person. Some people go to pieces in the face of adversity, but if you can employ the principles from the Buddha and also those that were interpreted by Buddhaghosa and the Visuddhimagga, I think that it will give you a toolkit and practical ability to withstand adversity in a more wholesome way. Stolles has been around for 30 years. The Buddha's principles have been around for over 2,000 years. In Stolles, he uses something called core, control, or your perceived perception over whatever situation you consider as adverse. When the adversity hits you, if you can take control of the situation, it provides a better outcome and an opportunity to deal with it. So core goes from control and ownership. And ownership he defines as accountability, and we would, in Buddhism, would say that it's kamma or karma that really creates our own ownership. And it might be the karma from several lifetimes ago that comes to the forefront today, but it's just a form of adversity. He then talks about reach, the ability to keep the mind from proliferating, as we call it, the monkey mind or the puppy mind. The mind, as Master said, the mind talks. It floods you with thoughts. And you have a choice of either being controlled by the thoughts or learning how to control the thoughts. The ability to use mindfulness in your conquering of adversity is very important. And also the ability not to cling. Grasping and clinging, that's really the definition of suffering. And then the final core principle is endurance. And this goes to one of the three marks of existence, which we call anicca or impermanence. Because we know no matter how bad it is, it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you can just wait long enough and not get sucked into the drama, because the mind will spin it up. The mind will spin up a drama. It's just like when you're meditating and you suddenly find yourself somewhere else. And it's like, what happened to the breath? I got to go back to the breath. The major sutras in the Mahayana tradition that deal with adversity is the Lotus Sutra, the Heart Sutra, and the Diamond Sutra. And then, of course, the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths can be looked upon as really a prescription. If you get an infection and the doctor says, here, take this antibiotic, the only way that the antibiotic is successful is if you take it. You've got to let it do its work. It's the same with the Four Noble Truths. We know that dukkha, which is often defined as suffering, but more accurately, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's the foremost living translator of Buddhist texts today, he says that it's unsatisfactoriness versus suffering, which makes a lot more sense. But we all know that we have this suffering or unsatisfactoriness in life. It can be from a pebble in your shoe to cancer. It's going to hit you. So you might as well prepare for it. And as we talked, grasping, craving, ignorance are the basis of the suffering. And then he talks about nirodha, cessation, that there's a way to end this craving, and that is the path, or magga, the Noble Eightfold Path. If we take these concepts and apply them to the core dimensions, then we have control, which is really right action or skillful means. And we'll talk about mind as forerunner, and that's one of the basic teachings of the Buddha. The ownership principle is, again, karma, personal responsibility, right effort. Reach is mindfulness, and anatta, or non-self or no self, one of the most difficult concepts that I find to fully assimilate. Because if I look at Tom or Austin or Jesse or Rachel or anybody here, if I know you, I know, well, gosh, that's Austin. But if you look at the constituent parts, what we call the five aggregates, we know that Austin is not just his form. He's not really a person that doesn't change. I mean, when he was little, he was quite a bit different. And as he gets older, he's going to change. He's not his feelings. He's not his mental formation. So although these five aggregates come together to form a person, none of those individually are that person. So how can you say that there's a person that we can define singularly that doesn't change? It's just like everything else. Impermanence is one of the universal truths, or the three marks of existence. And of course, the other way to look at impermanence is through the lens of this problem is not forever. It's not going to define my life. And then Chiante, or patience, and virya, which is vigor or energy, comes under the endurance heading. So the way that Stolles looks at these different adversity quotients are in three different segments: climbers, campers, or quitters. And basically, in the Buddhist concepts, the high adversity quotient are those people that embody the the paramitas, or the perfections of wisdom. They see obstacles or adversity as an ability to practice and learn and maintain equanimity and the view of anicca. And it's important to know that there are many different levels of equanimity, but what it really means is equanimity without action. And I think you have to combine patience and equanimity, because if you have both, it gives you the ability to pause before you respond under any adverse circumstance. And I'm not going to talk about low adversity quotient or quitters, because nobody here is a quitter. Or you wouldn't be here, right? And I talked about the perfections of wisdom, or the 6 paramitas. And it's interesting that equanimity is not in the 6 paramitas, but I believe in the 10 paramitas. I think it is. So these conducts, these paramitas, or the perfections of wisdom, are the bedrock to face adversity, because if you can respond with these wholesome attitudes, your responses are going to be different than if you're responding from anger, greed, delusion, or ignorance. This is basically how to apply the formula in the Buddhist framework and also in Stolles' framework. And we can go through it just briefly. The first one it gives the example of a work failure. And you can either let it slap you in the face, and then woe is me, and I'm a failure, and I'm never going to be anything. Or you can look at it from the Buddhist perspective and say, what skills can I develop? It's just a different way of looking at a stressful situation and finding a solution. And then the conflict in relationships is what I was talking about earlier, that ability to pause before you respond. These meditation techniques can help. And I'm sure everybody is familiar with Vipassana or insight meditation, where we really are using a systematic approach, primarily through the Satipatthana Sutta, or the direct path to realization, where we focus on the body, the mind, feelings. The compassion meditation is something that can be done in combination with metta, or loving kindness meditation, which can really work to soften your reactivity in a certain situation. And I don't want to stop without giving you what I find helpful from the actual words of the Buddha and in the Visuddhimagga. So this is probably the most fundamental, one of the most fundamental and important concepts that the Buddha laid out. It's all about mind. It's all about not letting your thoughts dominate. And basically what he says here is your direct experience is shaped from your mental state. And if you speak out from an unwholesome position, then you're going to suffer immensely. If you respond from a more pure or wholesome aspect of mind, then you will find happiness. And that's really the basis of that teaching. And it really goes to what Thich Nhat Hanh said. Most of you have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. And one of his sayings was that the way out is in. And I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but I think I can guess that he's talking about conquering the mind. He's talking about taming the mind to the extent that you're not dragged around by your thoughts. As far as the mind talking, constantly dragging you from one room to the next. The Buddha in the Dhammapada, verse 81 says, as a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. The rock is not created by removing the winds. It is created by subduing the inner turbulence that would otherwise be moved by every contact. And I think you can also use water. If you've ever seen a large rock, we used to go camping at a place down on the Current River, and there was a huge rock close to the shore, but still in the main channel. And that rock was there. We went camping at that place for 55 years, and the rock never moved. And it was steadfast, and the water just flowed around it. And I think you can use that analogy with the mind. The mind can be the flowing water. The mind doesn't just hit the rock and stop unless you let it. If you let it flow, you have less problems. This is one of the Buddha's verses about controlling the mind and how important it is. And he talks about fighting 1,000 battles 1,000 times and winning every time, but that the mind itself is the one that you need to conquer. And whoever can do that is the greatest victor. And then in Dhammapada 223, he talks about how to, when confronted with anger, you respond with love, evil with good, stingy with generosity, and the liar with truth. Although in today's world, it's sometimes difficult, isn't it? That's why it's so important to assimilate these concepts, because it's just like exercise. And I've used this analogy before. There's a principle in exercise physiology called the specific adaptation to implied demand, which is you exercise, you get stronger. When I first started doing chin-ups, I could do 2, and probably not with very good form. Now I do 270 of them every week. And how did that happen? I'm not saying that to be arrogant, because every one of you can do it. How does it happen? Because the muscles adapt. And at my age, muscle strength is very important, because sarcopenia is one of the things that happens in old age. You lose your muscles, you lose your balance, you fall, you can't catch yourself, you break a hip, and you're dead in a year. It's just like this Dhammapada verse. The body is soon decayed, a frail dwelling. The mind, if guarded, brings great benefit. And it reminds me of a parable that the Buddha gave a Dharma talk, and he got up to leave, and somebody chased him down, and it was a very elderly parishioner. And he said, I wish I could come see you more, but I'm sick and I can't travel, and it's very difficult for me. And the Buddhist turned and told him, Artura Kairu, Chitta Nana Puram Vivacity. When the body is sick, the mind must not be sick. So this is what we do. We train the mind. And ultimately, whether we want to admit it or not, that mind training will come in handy when we're on our deathbed and the mind tries to pull us into despair and fear. The mind will be strong enough, if you've trained it properly, to keep you focused. And it's very important. As Master has told me many times, you have to be focused at the moment of death. Because if you're not, it can be determinative of where you're reborn. And even if you don't believe in rebirth, taming the mind in that moment over the years so that you can focus in that moment is quite important. Because no matter who you are, you want to have a good death. You know it's coming eventually. We don't know when. We come back to mindfulness. And as I said, the mindfulness of the body, mind, feelings, mental formations, objects, or phenomena, that's all in the Satipatthana. I talked about equanimity. And this is another parable that I like a lot that's contained in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha is leaving after a Dharma talk and a Brahmin or someone else comes up and confronts him and says, I don't like your robes. You beg for your food. Your philosophy is junk science. And the Buddha says, well, now let me ask you, if you offer a gift to someone and they don't take that gift, who does the gift belong to? And the Brahmin says, oh, well, whoever offered it still keeps the gift. And the Buddha says, well, in the same way, I'm not accepting your abuse. It remains with you. I think that if we can keep that in our mind when somebody's really insulting us, we can go a long ways in taming the mind. In the Visuddhimagga, I told you I was going to talk to you about this quote. Buddhaghosa says that mind training is not gentle pampering, it's discipline. That's all we're talking about, discipline. He goes on to say, just as a frontier post is guarded on all sides, so should the mind be guarded in all postures. Another quote from Buddhaghosa, the aspect of non-retaliation. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it's the most healthy. When you get angry, there's a lot of things that happen in the body. Adrenaline, which can make you feel good, but it's not very good for you. Cortisol spikes. Cortisol is horrible for you. We talked about this. And here's one of the most important teachings as well. I know I've said that before, but it goes to the non-self. And it's from, again, the Samyutta Nikaya. And we chant some of this. All of these 5 aggregates are not self. Seen with wisdom, or satipatthana, which is clear seeing. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. These are the 8 things that the Buddha said are existent in the world: gain, praise, or gain and loss, praise and blame, fame, disrepute, pleasure and pain. The Buddha said of those 8, one who understands these and remains unshaken is called steady, wise, and composed. These are some of the things that you can use, the questions that, if you can catch yourself, in the Abhidharma, there's a section on the 17 steps of perception. One of those is where the mind turns. They call it adverting once there's a stimulus. If you can take the time to ask these 3 questions, it can soften your response and really make it a more wise response. And the Buddhist comment basically is, you don't have to pick up somebody else's crap and carry it around on your shoulders. And so you ask yourself, do I need to pick this up? Do I need to assimilate this anger from this other person? It reminds me of what George Carlin said. The person that's driving in front of me slower is an idiot. The one that speeds around me is a maniac. So this closing reflection is pretty self-evident. Our practice makes the mind more stable. It makes it stronger. We're not going to escape adversity. We just learn how to handle it better. And then finally, just stop letting them drag you around. And remember that adversity is a teacher. Adversity is your teacher. You accept it as that, it's a lot easier to deal with just about any situation that comes your way. Thank you.